Recently, I've been hearing from a lot of people that they're worried about hiring freezes. Right? They're worried about companies are not hiring like they used to. The stock market's down. Things are not in a good state right now in tech and in the economy in general. And so they're asking me, what should I do? How should this affect my interview prep? How should this affect me applying to different jobs? And so I wanted to take a moment to address this and to talk through kind of what strategies should you be considering? What things should you be keeping in mind when we're in a situation like this? Right? And so as hiring is slowing down a little bit, as some companies, as especially some of these big companies are implementing hiring freezes, like Meta implementing their hiring freeze, what do? And so in this video, I want to give you 3 specific tools or strategies that you can leverage as you're thinking about this to really keep a clear head in this process. Right? Keep a clear head when you're seeing things going on around you that you do not have control over. Right? And so the very first thing that I want to recommend here is as you're going through this process, realize that there are things that you can control and there are things that you cannot control. Right? You cannot control what happens in the stock market. You cannot control what companies are doing, but what you can control is how you prepare. You can control how you go out there and prepare for interviews. You can control what companies you interview for. Because the reality is that what most of us do, what happens a lot and what I see from my students a lot is that it's easy to look at these macro trends and think that the macro trend is directly going to affect me. And now what do I mean by this, right? There's this macro trend of the stock market, right? The stock market. And there's the micro trends of what do you actually experience day to day? And those don't necessarily align, right? The macro trend does affect things overall, but there is all the micro that is unique to your situation. And I like using this example of a couple years ago when everyone was, I'm based in New York City, when everyone was leaving New York City, that pushed rents way down, right? So you could go rent an apartment, you could get like 3 months of free rent, you could save $1,000 a month. And now as things are coming back, now in 2022, people are moving back into the city, and so rent prices are going way up again. Right, the average rent price I think has gone up by some crazy amount, like probably $800 a month or something. And the question is, does that mean that there are no longer any affordable apartments in New York? And the answer is of course not, right? There's still plenty of affordable apartments in New York. It just means that they're harder to find. It means that you're not gonna go down to like any street corner, go into any building, and they're just gonna be like, here, 3 free months of rent. Right? You're gonna have to search, you're gonna have to find that apartment, but they still exist. And in the same way here, even when hiring is slowing down, that doesn't mean that there aren't jobs that exist. That doesn't mean that there aren't tons of companies out there who are still hiring, who are still looking for amazing engineers. It just means that it might be a little bit harder. And so what that means, first tip here, is make sure that you give yourself enough time in your interview process. Make sure you give yourself the space. Make sure that you are preparing and you are thinking in advance about, okay, I might want to change jobs in a couple months. How do I set myself up for that? How do I take the time to do my interview prep? How do I take the time to build connections with companies so that I can leverage that when the time comes? Now, beyond this, there are 2 specific things that you can do to make sure that you are able to find good opportunities. Right? And the one thing that you should not do is you should not like throw your hands up in the air and say, oh, now's just not a good time to interview. I'm just going to stay with what I'm doing. Right? If you don't like your job, if you know that you could be getting paid more, if you know there are better opportunities out there for you, this is still the time to find those opportunities. This is still the time to go out there and make a change, but there are 2 things that you have to do. The first is that you need to be less picky about which companies you want to work for. What I mean by that is there are millions and millions of great companies out there, but if your goal is to work at Meta, and Meta has implemented a hiring freeze, you can't work at Meta right now, right? You can't get your foot in the door. You can't even do an interview because they're not going to interview you. But that doesn't mean that you can't find interviews. That doesn't mean that you can't get your foot in the door at companies. There are so many companies where this is actually a great opportunity for them because now that some of those bigger companies are implementing hiring freezes, they might finally be able to get great talent and they might be really excited to hire you. And working at a company with 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people can be a great way to learn and grow as an engineer. So if you broaden your horizons a little bit, this can actually be a great opportunity for you to explore opportunities that you wouldn't have explored otherwise, find opportunities that could be great for you, and land a role where many of these companies will pay just as well as the top companies, right? Land that role where you can learn a lot, where you can grow as an engineer, so that when companies like Meta stop or unfreeze hiring, that opportunity is there for you. You're prepared to then go capture that opportunity. So that's number one. Be a little bit more flexible, right? Be more flexible about what companies you consider and what opportunities you think might be a good fit for you. Don't limit yourself to, okay, I'm only interested in interviewing at this one company. And then number two, and this is gonna sound obvious, it might sound like I'm a broken record here, but it's so true, is you have to get good at interviewing, right? If a job is more competitive, if there are more people interviewing for that job, that means that you have to be better, because you need to be the number one person that they interview. If they interview 10 people, that means that you only need to be better than 9 other people. If they interview 100 people, you have to be better than 99 other people, right? And so if we are experiencing this, if we are experiencing a hiring freeze, if we're experiencing slowdowns, if we're experiencing companies being more selective about who they hire, then the number one thing that you can do is make yourself the best possible candidate. These companies will hire great engineers all day. The problem is that when they interview people and people aren't prepared for interviews and they don't do well and they don't demonstrate that they actually have the skills that the company wants, the company throws their hands up and say there are no good engineers, right? We can't find good engineers because you're not passing the interview. But if you take the time to do the interview prep, do it right, watch some of the other videos on this channel, go to bytebybyte.com/training. I'll share this here, bytebybyte.com/training. Watch our free training, learn how to interview effectively, learn strategies that go beyond memorizing leak code problems to actually, how do I think about these problems? How do I approach these problems in a strategic way? Become great at that. And then there are so many companies that are still going to want to hire you. There's so many companies that are still going to find a place for you in that company because they have room for good engineers. Become the person where they know that if they hire you and they're paying you $200,000 a year, the work that you do is going to make them $1 million a year. It's going to make them $10 million a year. That's how, even in a hiring freeze, if I know you're going to make me money, I'm going to pay you. I'm going to hire you. I would love to hire you. I'm going to fight to hire you if I know that you're going to make me money, if I know that you're going to help me grow the business, and if I know that you're going to help me a year from now be in a stronger position as a CEO, as a engineering team lead than I was the previous year. So as we're thinking about these hiring freezes, don't use this macro trend as a way to give up. Don't use this macro trend as a way to say, oh, well, I'm just not, why even bother right now? Right? Don't use the macro trend as an excuse. Use the macro trend to understand what it is going to take for you to be successful now. Use the macro trend as a way to understand, what do I have to do differently versus what I can keep doing the same, but then keep going. Use this as an opportunity to find a great job. Use this as an opportunity to find a great role. And again, if you're looking for help on your interview prep, go to bytebybyte.com/training. I'm happy to talk with you more, help you with that process. And so with that, that's all I got for today. Hopefully this was helpful if you've been feeling worried about hiring freezes at all. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.